Good.
Ready? Okay. Okay, got some visitors tonight. Phyllis and Darin Lee, stand up, please. They come here. They drove here all the way from Krakatoa. And Darin is a featured speaker tonight. He's a guardian and driver. Miss Phyllis. Cindy, I know we got about $39,000, right?
Yeah, we wish. Move that decimal over a little bit.
Oh,
$3,900.
How many members we at right now?
We have 62
Okay.
paid members.
There's
Members that
63
are-
now with what I gave you, right?
No, that's including.
Okay, all
So we
right,
have
good.
62 that are paid up.
Okay, and Krista Kelly is working, in case you don't know that, she works every day except Fridays. And where's she working, New Orleans or Baton Rouge?
Baton Rouge.
Okay. Mixed bag report, Bill?
Got it up. Hang on. Here, Mark, how are you?
Hey, you Bill.
Good, good. All right, mixed bag. Here we go. The standings so far, we have a total of 141 entries, which is pretty good. This is quite a bit up from about a month or so ago. And the cool thing about this list is the person who is in fourth place. Me? No, the person in fourth place. Count down. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Knucklehead, yeah, I see it.
Yeah, it's AKA Knucklehead, which is Jim's grandson. And he is what, 16 or 17?
Turned 17, Thursday.
Last Thursday. So we've got a junior member out there that is really going after it. So he's got 11, no, he's got 11 species. I
I'm
can't
not
count.
showing any more secret spots.
So that is the mixed bag.
Thank you, Bill.
Sir.
Chris and Cassie, anything going on in the casting world? Any updates? Good.
Yeah, how many people are interested in becoming a CI? A certified casting instructor? Anybody? Okay. Because there's an event taking place in the last Saturday of this month, this coming month, in College Station, Texas, where 4 of the casting board of governors from FFI are going to be doing a certification workshop and a pre-test exam. So it's almost like you're taking the exam. They're going to walk you through it, and it's probably the best thing there is for you to prepare for the exam. Because as you're taking it, it will show you what you're doing wrong and everything else. So if anybody's interested in becoming a casting instructor, you know somebody here that's, please pass that on. It's on our calendar page on our website. I'll put a blurb on our blog.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. So anybody who wants to become a certified casting instructor,
Yeah.
look for the note coming up on Facebook.
Casting instructor.
Okay,
Got some
events.
certified in here, but they're not casting instructors.
So events. Cass, what's our event going to be for September 25th?
The National Hunting Fishing Day?
No, National Hunting Fishing Day is September 23rd. 25th is the next meeting here.
Oh,
Not the next one, but the one after the membership meeting.
well, we'll try to get our guy from Robbie Maxwell here
Okay?
again.
All right.
We'll see. But if I can't get him solid for that, we'll have something.
All right, let's get a backup or something like that. And Darin, thank you. Phyllis, thank you for coming. Darin had to change his work schedule a little bit to come help us out. And I'm very happy to see how many people showed up here tonight. Thank you, listeners. This is a very interesting presentation. I had the distinction of asking the stupidest questions when you gave it down Lafayette. Darin?
Rick. Sure. I guess while we get started, I'll just say, I got into fly fishing about 20 years ago. Red Stick Club actually really helped, learning curve was pretty steep. Got in the saltwater end of it first, and because I had an uncle from Canada who wanted to catch a redfish on a fly rod. So we tried a couple times and couldn't get it done. So I said, well, let me try for the next year before you come back. And so that's kind of how I got into fly fishing, and been a member of Red Stick for a while. Never could make the meetings because I was in Thibodeau for 20 years. Moved to Opelousas, started going to the Acadiana Fly Rodders and being part of that club. And again, glad y'all invited me, and hopefully that clap and applause wasn't premeditated. This, this presentation is worth listening to.
Yeah, I'll get my mouse to work just a second.
So, Poverty Point. There we go. All right. So, Poverty Point Reservoir, northeast Louisiana. Anybody been there? Heard of it? Yeah, passed it, heard of it. What'd you hear of it?
Expensive political gamble.
Yeah, I've heard that. Big sockeye, state record, well, white perch up here, right? So state record perch, white perch fishing. And so that's kind of what started us on the road to That's what started us on the road to thinking about it. So yeah, Poverty Point Reservoir, it's in northeast Louisiana near Delhi, just north of I-20. It is a constructed reservoir, and the whole reservoir is basically a state park. Oddly enough, with some private development, those little fingers of land out into the lake are part of a private development thing. And yes, if you go on the internet, you will hear some people like it's a big boondoggle. I'm just here to talk about the fishing. It's pretty good fishing.
That's all we worry about.
Good place.
They let lesser people in there.
What's that?
They let lesser people fish.
I've been in there, yes. So, all right, Jim, I've got something on the screen. Space bar. Say it's trying to connect. Here we go.
There you go.
All right. So, okay. So what piqued our interest, and I say ours, a group of friends and I started taking a trip up there. What piqued our interest is, I'm reading Louisiana Sportsman's Mag. This is in 2016, and so this article comes out about, Delhi Angler lands new, white crappie state record, or I think it was third at the time, second at the time. And, I read the article, didn't pay much attention to it, but about 2 weeks later, now a new number 3 record comes out, like 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. And I'm like, wait a minute, I need to pay more attention to these articles. So I went back and read it. And what really piqued my interest is they're catching these in 3.5 to 4 feet of water. Well, that's fly fishable, right? I mean, that's easy fly fishing. Now, this is February and March, so, they're up spawning, right? But, okay. Then they don't use scents or nibbles, right? So, like crappie anglers are not putting nibbles on there, if this is true, right? So, but it's on the internet, so it must be. So they're not using scents or nibbles, and they don't spider rig. You know what spider rigging is? No? Okay, so spider rigging is that little picture in the end where the guy is on the front of his boat and he's got 6 or 8 rods sticking out in holders, and he's got them set at different depths, and he just trolls along real slow looking at his electronics, and if one of the rods goes down, he catches it. He's got a long net so that he doesn't get tangled up in his other 8 rods, and it's not my kind of fishing. If you like doing it, great. It's just not my kind of fishing, right? But okay, these guys are catching these things in 3.5, 4 feet of water. They're not using scent, right? So scented baits and those kind of things, and they're not spider rigging or deep jigging and all. So I'm like, again, this is potentially fly fishing or fly fishable.
All right, my PowerPoint's not liking you there.
Network connection failed.
Yeah, that's that.
Okay.
That's the library's gonna have.
Okay.
There we go. He's up.
We can soldier on. All right, so, did I skip one? Yeah. So is it conducive to fly fishing, right? So we start talking, again, it's a 2,700 acre man-made lake. So it's about 3 miles long and about 1 mile wide. Again, supposedly it's water supply, recreation, economic development. It was constructed in about 2001, and it was basically old agriculture fields that they basically put a dam around and flooded it up. It's pumped from Bayou Macon, so there is a pump up here on kind of the north end, and there's a drain down here on the south end. And so they just pump water in on the north end if they need to and pump it out. But again, shallow, average depth, 6 to 8 feet. So again, that's very fly fishable, right? I mean, if I can get down 6 to 8 feet, no problem, right? There's a catch, okay? But so you're looking at this and it's like, okay, I'm looking at this in 2016, 2017. So I want to take a trip up there, and warning, I'm a biologist, so data, I gotta have data. I gotta look at all the data. So I'm gonna take a trip up there. What's the chance it's gonna be blown out, right? This is a destination trip. I'm not just running up there. At the time I'm living in Thibodeau, right? So that's 4.5 hours or so. But so, this is a national hydrology data set. It's on the internet. You can see all the flow patterns. So basically what you see is that most of the flow on the west side here is very narrow. This line right here, all this flow goes that way, and the only thing that flows into the reservoir is a very small area. So if they get a big rain, all the water coming down here is shunted around and into Bayou Macon, and so the chances of this thing getting blown out and being all muddy and it's pretty low probability. I mean, you can get a terrible, NOAA type flood, but most times you go up there, it's not going to be blown out, right? So something to travel to, right? So 6 to 8 feet deep, they're catching big Kisatchie, and
Water's good.
and water's good. Chances of it getting blown out, when you've had to schedule a cabin 6 months in advance, is pretty low, right? Can't control the weather, but I can, All right, so really, big Kisatchie again, is this just a couple articles? Is this just people talking about the big ones? Are people really catching big ones? And so again, state fish records, and this is from 2021, but back in 2016, you can just see Poverty Point, Poverty Point, Poverty Point, Poverty Point, Poverty Point, right? So I mean, they're catching big Kisatchie. And pardon me for saying Kisatchie, right? But it's just ingrained. So Wildlife Fisheries publishes lake assessment, right? So you dig up the lake assessment on the internet, and basically, again, this is from 2012, but basically there's two things to see here. So if you look at the average length, right, what anglers are bringing to the dock, you've got to realize that those numbers add up to, I think, over 50-something% are 10 inches or bigger, right? 11 inches or bigger. So, we're talking about, they're not catching many 13, 14, 15-inch class fish, but they're catching, quite a few from 10, 11, and 12, right? So again, it's not tons of small Kisatchie that are coming to the dock. Now, are they catching huge numbers of fish? Now the limit's 25, so a lot of people are catching, 1 to 10, and then about 25% are coming in that larger size class. So you're not loading the ice chest, right? And again, I can't emphasize enough, for us, this is a destination. We're going there and we're just picking a date. We're trying to hit like the spawn. But, so a lot of people, state park, it's probably a destination. I mean, we've talked to guys and like they live there, they come in the evenings after work, and if the weather's right, they are catching a bunch of fish, right? But for the most part, people are catching nice fish. You're just not loading the boat. And so we jokingly said, hey, let's go up there and set a new fly rod state record, right? And realistically, it was a joke, but then about our fifth trip up there in 2019, my buddy Gary Peterson, he's with Red Stick Fly Fishers, lo and behold, he does. He sets a new white crappie state record at 1.84. Now, that's nowhere near the 3.5, 3 3/4 pounders, but still, nice nice white crappie. So again, what got us up there was jokingly looking at this lake. It's very fly fishable. You know, they're catching nice fish. They might not be loading the boat, but it's good size sac-a-lait. And you know, so hey, let's take a trip up there. We did, and we've had some decent success. It's been a learning curve. And again, besides records, you know, we are catching nice fish. So again, I think that was like 1.5 pounds. Mark caught. I think that one I'm holding there is like 1.25 pounds or something like that. You know, right at a pound or something. So again, we're catching nice size fish. Not a lot of throwbacks. And again, full disclosure, you know, like I think that. So typically, what we do is, you know, we'll take off work, get up there in the Friday afternoon. We'll fish Friday afternoon, evening, get settled in our cabin, you know, and then fish Saturday, all day Saturday, and then fish like maybe half a day or so Sunday, come home. So, you know, what you're looking at here is, like, I think that was from Friday night, 2 guys in the boat. What you're looking at on the table there, that was me and my boat partner. So fished Friday evening, and that's all day Saturday before we have a fish fry, and then, you know, whatever we caught on Sunday, we either bring home or turn loose. And the other thing to note is it's not just sac-a-lait. So, you know, you can see white bass, you can see some catfish. We had decent catches of catfish on occasion. We've caught some hybrid stripers that are stocked in the lake, and then you can see some sac-a-lait at the top. And we've even caught some largemouth. They have some special restrictions. There's a slot on largemouth. But, you know, again, we're not loading the boat, but we've never not been able to fry fish and have a good fish fry and usually take a few fish home. So, you know, and you usually, state park cabin sleep 6 or 7. So, you know, there's 3 boats of us, 2 in a boat, you know, 2 per boat. So there's 6, sometimes 7 of us. I brought the kayak one time when there were 7 of us. I fished out of the kayak. I caught fish. So a little bit about that flat ag land, right? So 6 or 7 feet deep, and that all sounds well and good, but then you start looking at it again. Remember, I'm a biologist. So you start looking at it, and you know, some of it's flatter than others. And so again, just kind of how they make that. So if you look on the left side of the screen, this is what they call the Bayou Macon Bluff or Macon Ridge. And you know, it's basically in the delta, right? The Mississippi River Delta swept back and forth. So that side's pretty flat, but that's about a 20-foot bluff right there, right? So you know, what's happened here is wind-blown deposits have blown over and create these lush hills, and then there's a big steep drop-off. And so that's how they were able to basically take and just make this levee out to Bayou Macon, make a levee all the way back down to the bluff, and then basically have this reservoir that's basically 6 to 8 feet deep, sort of over the whole majority of that reservoir. And then to build these fingers of land out here, they basically dug from the bottom of the lake. So now it's not all totally flat, right? And so what you see on my right, so what you see on this side of the screen here basically is digging the lake. And so you can see, so they've started to sort of dig this borrow pit to build the dam. They've dug a borrow pit here. They've started to dig borrow all the way along in here. And you can basically see that what this does is this creates these deeper areas. You can also see some tree areas in here and around in here. And this is where those fingers of land have sort of stuck out now into the lake. So you can see they dug a big channel here that's now been flooded, and it's deeply flooded, right? So while the whole lake on average is maybe 6 to 8 feet, now they're starting to create some topography, and then there was some existing topography in there. And I'll be honest, is that tends to be where we catch a lot of the fish. We haven't been very successful out in the middle of the lake, right? So we've been most successful in these old channels here. There were some old channels that maybe 10, 20 feet deep. We've been pretty successful along this edge here, and we've been, you know, up in some of these areas, and then of course in the north end here where this old drainage comes through, and I'll kind of show you that in more detail. But also if you look, so what I did was I took the 1980s topo map and I overlaid it on the current image, right? So, and made it kind of transparent. And again, all this is available on the internet for free. So you can dig up these old topo maps, and what it shows you is kind of, okay, yeah, it's basically kind of all flat out here, but you can see where there's some old road beds that maybe had some gravel on them. You can see where there's an old channel that comes down this side, all the way down, and comes into this area where the drain is. You can see some old cuts up here into the bluff that, you know, where these drainages come in and come out. And those are all areas that we focused on over time, sort of trying to find fish. And of course, again, we've kind of been really successful in these old channels over here on this side that are deeper. We've been successful in these cuts and some here, and then we've been pretty successful in this north area where the old channel came down into the lake, right? And it's got some old standing timber and things like that out there. So while it's kind of flat and nondescript, there are some areas that we've keyed in on over time and been able to find fish. Again, you know, just out here in the flat, we've drifted some of this. We've tried to find some of these old road beds, and we found what we think are some of those old road beds and things, but at least when we're there, we're not catching fish. And it's not like you see a lot of boats out in the middle of the lake. You know, people are kind of around the edges, and they're fishing these structure features now, is what they're doing. And so, again, just kind of zooming in on the south end of the lake to give you an idea. So, again, I overlaid this on the picture where they were digging the deep channel. You can see where they kind of went into this area that had trees, but this area is still there. They made this deep, this is where the cabins are, right? So your cabins are in this deep area with pilings. So in the evenings, you know, while they're frying the fish, if you can sneak out there, catch a few more, which I've done, you know. We've done pretty good sometimes doing that.
Where's the RV park at?
The RV park is down here on the south end. I'll zoom in on that. And then again, like you can kind of see where the roads are from the development out here. But you know, we've come in here, and this was an old slough that, you know, never got farmed. It was always stayed wet. And so now that they've flooded that, instead of, you know, being 6 to 8 feet deep, this is now 15, sometimes 20 feet deep. It had old standing timber in it, structure in it. Plus, they've all kind of built their houses and docks around it, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been pretty successful in some of those areas. And then, like I said, you can kind of see these cuts going up in here that are flooded that, you know, now you can ease up in and do some fishing. On the north end, again, you can kind of see there was a bunch of timber, right? That's why it's green on the topo map. You can see this old channel that comes down along the side of the bluff here. So, you know, we fished that, and we've done okay, but, and then they call this the jungle. So again, you can kind of see where those driveways come along for those development through here, and there's a break. There's a lot of standing timber in there. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't been in there yet. We've just fished other places, but so breaking it down, it's like, okay, it's 6 to 8 feet deep, but now there's a lot of different places that you can start to target and look for fish and find structure and typical things that you would look for. So it's more than old ag land. It's old channels. They're the borrow pits. They did do some habitat enhancements. So when they built the lake, they put some sand pads in there for reproductive areas. There's, I think, 4,000 square feet, so like, you know, 40 by 40 or whatever, 20 by 40. They're not marked. Nobody tells you where they are. To be honest, we think we've seen some on some electronics, but can't confirm that. Brush piles, again, they're not marked. They don't tell you where they are. Again, we think we've found one, and again, you know, just based on this borrow area down here, you know, and you remember there was some trees in that old 80s topo, and it looks like they just, when they cleared that, they put some of those trees in some piles out there. So, but supposedly there are several brush piles out there in the lake. Also, they've added 4 artificial structures recently. So here, like just off of this point of land, there's one there. You can see there are a couple up in this area. And then there's one up here on the north end, just off this point right here. And that's a combination of PVC pallets and, you know, pipe kind of things that they've built since the lake has been in place. Of course, there's piers and boat docks where the development is, and then there's rock shoreline protection around pretty much the whole thing. The whole shoreline is rock. So that's another thing. It's not a, you know, a brushy, grassy shoreline. There's shore protection along the whole thing. So techniques. You know, we're fishing bank lines. If we're fishing bank lines, we're fishing bank lines just like you're fishing bank lines in probably any reservoir you fish, or in the, you know, marsh or the swamp. We're just kind of banging the thing. We're using floating lines, 8, 9 foot leaders. You know, we're either using with indicators, you know, 18, 24 inch. We typically start that way just to see if they're up on the bank. And again, when we've been going in the spring. You know, we've been going mid to late March, trying to hit the spawn, you know. The weather can get iffy, but we're trying to sneak in there and catch them up on the bank, right? I will say we've done okay on that, but it's not like we've hit them where they're just there, right? We catch a few on the bank, and then we start fishing deeper in some of those channels, and we'll see them staged on electronics or something like that. But we do that type of fishing, or without indicators, you know, count down a strip, just, you know, whatever you want to do to try to get whatever depth you want to try to get. Favorite flies, again, you know, just kind of pick your poison. We've caught them on all kinds of things. Can't really say there's one miracle fly for Poverty Point. You know, fluff butts. One of my favorites is that tussle bug with the wing there in the bottom right. So, you know, take Dirt Bird's tussle bug, tie it on a little bit bigger hook, and put a calf tail wing on it. That's my favorite, personally. But, you know, catches silly minnow, obviously does really well too. And if you use a lead jig head, you know, it gets down pretty good. So, if we are in deep water, you know, we'll see fish suspended 10, 20 feet deep. Now you're getting sort of outside my typical comfort zone of, you know, countdown, that kind of thing. We're really going to floating lines with slip cork style indicators, and we're talking about pretty big indicators, and we're talking about leaders that don't, you know, follow the leader formulas, right? So I couldn't find the pre-made leader that I had, but basically with a slip cork or a pegged cork, you know, what we're doing is we're just making like a 18 to 20 foot straight mono leader, like 11 thousandths, right? And about the last 2 feet, I'll add on maybe 2x tippet or 3x tippet and put my fly on that with a surgeon's knot. And then right at the surgeon's knot, that 2 feet up from the fly, I'll put split shot. And then you just put your pegs and your stoppers for your floating bobber. And I mean, that thing can go down, you know, however deep you want it to go, 15 feet, whatever. It ain't pretty casting, you know. The guy I saw on the internet who first sort of built the leader, he's fishing trout in these deep reservoirs out west, right? 15, 20 feet deep, and they're catching trout on chironomids. And I've got a slide about that. But so that technique, you know, really was, and his leader, he calls it the flip-flop cast. You know, he's just flop it back behind you and then flop it out in front of you and let it take a little line and flop it, you know. And of course, that's why I like the slip cork, because you've only got about 2 to 3 feet of line with the fly out in front of the cork as you're trying to cast it, right? But then once it hits and that weight takes it down, you know, wherever your stoppers are, you know, that's where it'll stop. So it's kind of like crappie fishing with slip corks and jigs, you know, and you can get, you know, but it ain't pretty, right? it ain't pretty. But we're doing that a lot. And then some of the guys just like the pegged corks. So, you know, basically what you do is you got your line through there and you make a loop in your line and you peg the loop. And your line, you know, runs through your stopper here. And when you put a loop in it and stop it, now the cork just stays on your line. But when a fish hits, it's enough to pop that out, and then your cork and will slide all the way down to your fly, so you can work your fish all the way to the end of your rod. right? And again, I'll show you a couple resources that are out there that can show you how that works. But you know, again, this comes from the trout fishing world in these deep reservoirs, and you're just kind of taking that stillwater trout mentality and saying, okay, I'm fishing sockeye, they're 10, 20 feet deep, they're kind of the same as trout. I might be fishing minnow patterns instead of chironomids or insects, but I'm basically doing the same kind of thing. And so again, you know, we have done sinking lines, count down the strip, but again, that just comes down to, you know, getting a better idea of how deep your fly is getting. Whereas the indicators, you know, if you want it down, if you see fish on your electronics that are 15 feet down, you can set your fly at 13, 14 feet, and you know it's right in that zone where you want it to be. And you can adjust it and try again. And so that's been as good as the sinking lines, but just a bit more, I guess, confidence in that technique. So we've been doing that quite a bit. And again, favorite flies, again, clouser minnows, they're easy to tie. Again, one of my favorites is this one. I tie it out of Steve Farrar Flash Blend and then put this lateral scale in it. There's a minnow, it's called Silverside, Brook Silverside. It's the most common minnow in the state of Louisiana. Also, it's a great anchovy, right? Bay anchovy fly. So, you know, that right there does my freshwater and saltwater, you know, with one small minnow that's basically common to just about any body of water in the state, right? So.
That balance fly, is that Kurt's Collins balance fly?
So the one here, I'm gonna admit, I haven't tied it yet. I'm gonna tie it. That comes from, it's called Bobcat Hollow Fly Fishing. I forget the name of that guy, but he's got a step-by-step on the internet. And I'm getting ready to tie that. But I really like the look of it. It's with laser dub, and it's got one of those fish mask skulls with a tungsten bead. But then these, basically I got the idea of these balance flies from Phil Rowley in a lot of his. I kind of upsized them. In case you don't know what balance flies are, you know, you can hopefully see the monofilament leader there hanging. The bead's way out front of where the jig hook is. And what that does is by putting the weight up front, it basically will suspend and balance. So instead of the fly hanging down in the water like this, when it's under the cork, which, you know, people are like, oh, that's unnatural, the fish won't bite it. Some people say, well, it's injured, so it looks odd, so they'll bite it first, right? A lot of these guys like these balanced flies, so it will run under the cork and it will just bob on your leader as it drifts and as you make a drift, and it will look like an upright minnow just bobbing in front of the fish's face. So tie those balanced leeches or balanced kind of minnows, and they work pretty good. Again, trolling, if we're going along the banks, we're usually trolling and banging the banks. We'll anchor at the edges of deep holes, and again, you know, you're throwing your suspending or you're counting down and working these deep holes, or we're drifting over suspended fish. So, you know, these suspended fish are out in the deep part of that channel, and if we anchor and we can't get out to them, then maybe we'll try to set up and drift. Again, other boats in the area, it all just kind of depends on what you can do. But, you know, again, we've done all these various techniques, and they all, depending on the situation, you know, sort of work. So, you know, a lot of what we try to do is troll on the bank. If we're not picking up fish, then we'll go look in deeper water. And if we see them on electronics, or if we don't have electronics, we'll just start drifting areas we know may have structure and fish, and we pick up fish and we can anchor, then we'll start working either with countdowns or with these slip cork rigs and suspended. So it's all kind of worked for us. It just kind of depends on where the fish are, so you just kind of got to try different things. And part of that is, again, you know, if you get there and the fish aren't on the bank spawning, you know, chances are where we found them has been in the deeper water sections, and you got to start going deeper into those sections. Like I said, one of the things is we've not really hit them like out in the flat 6 to 8 foot part of the lake. So even though, you know, that's what got us there, is like, oh, this whole thing's 6 to 8 foot deep, it's fly fishable. We haven't found a lot of fish out there in those sections. And again, advanced stillwater trout fishing. This is Orvis's Guide to Fly Fishing. They got a YouTube. I mean, if you're kind of interested in this deeper technique and some of these things, those have been things that I've watched that have really kind of helped trigger me and like, okay, I can apply that to, fishing these deeper sockeye or whatever. Some guys to look for: Phil Rowley, Dennis Rickards, and Brian Chan. They're all over the internet. They're well known for these stillwater techniques of fly fishing. And again, it's mainly out west in these big reservoirs where during the hot part of the summer, these trout will go deep, sit on the bottom, and they'll eat these hatching, insects, but they're not coming up to the top. So if you want to catch fish, you're fishing in 10, 12, 15 feet of water, right? And in a big reservoir. So that's basically what I'm doing. Instead of trout, we're doing it for white perch. And I guess before I get off that, I'll say, one of the things like with techniques is like what these guys really helped with is like, so you're anchoring your boat, you're on one of these edges. If you think about it, you're anchoring in front of your boat, it swings in the wind's coming this way, there's two of you in the boat. So depending on how you're anchored, if one guy's fishing one side, and you're both right-handed, right? So I'm fishing, this side of the boat, this guy's casting, he's casting that side of the boat. We're casting at 45s or so, or almost 90 degrees from the boat. And what you do is you just mend often and mend little is kind of the technique. So as this wind is going to take your line and your bobber, and it's going to just float it down and drift. So I'm going to start out maybe 20 feet from the boat, and I'm just going to let it drift. And you can work that all the way to the back of the boat, pick it up, roll, cast it out, go 25 feet, and let it work. And just mend your line, because the wind's going to want to put that bow in there. So just keep mending it, let it, and you're just kind of trying to keep a straight line and let that work that line. And then when you work that line, 30 feet out, maybe 40 feet. Can't really cast much more than 40 feet. I found with that crazy slip cork rig, you can do better if you count down. But if you're working those corks, 30, maybe 40 feet out, and then you get a real mess. so but you can work both sides of the boat, and you can work it all the way around, and then you can move up that ledge, that deep hole, you can move up that ledge, re-anchor, try it again, right? That's kind of how you fish those places. Or you're drifting across, you get it out there, and you're just keeping steady contact with it as you drift through the area. Maybe you're popping it, moving it a little bit, not popping it like a popping cork, but maybe you're moving a little bit to give it a little motion. But that's kind of the two things. But again, these guys, in the way you can cast and work that water. And if you're both having to cast to the same side, then you're just working each in line. And then when this guy gets to the back and this guy gets about 45, you're picking up and you're recasting and trying it again. You do kind of have to work in sync with each other if you're doing this in two in a boat, right? So, but again, a lot of this kind of comes from that stillwater angling stuff that these guys have kind of figured it out, how to do this with the fly rod in open water. So current LDWF regs on this lake, again, there is for bass, there is a 15 to 19 inch protected slot limit, and 8 fish per day, only 1 over 19. So your bass regulations have a little bit of restriction to them, but we've not torn up the bass, to be honest. But again, we're not really fishing, a lot of bass type techniques. As far as sockeye go, it's 25 fish per day and 50 fish possession limit. So it is half the limit of normal state regs too. So again, when I showed you that thing, it was like, oh, most of the people, nobody's catching over 50 fish. Well, yeah, nobody's catching over 50 fish because it's over the limit, right? So part of that, you need to think about how many people are catching how many fish is also predicated on, there's a 25 fish limit. I think the most we've caught in that, like Friday, Saturday, I think we've come to the dock with 15. That was probably our best trip, but 15 nice fish. But again, it's a destination, right? So you kind of have to, I can't stress that enough. I can't at least think about it in terms of I'm going to go up there and just, fill up an ice chest, right? Because you'd have to hit everything exactly perfect. And we scheduled the trip 6 months ago, right? So, and we've hit it all. We've hit sunny weather, we've hit windy, cloudy, rain, we've hit, we've gone the gamut, right? So it just kind of depends. So I'll just say this is the north end, there's two marinas. This is the north end marina, and you can kind of look out, here is a fishing pier. You see all that standing timber on the north end? So again, you know, there's some structure, you can fish there on that north end. It's a little bit deeper. That's where I've kayaked. You know, you're right there at the boat launch. You can get into that timber and you can fish the banks or you can fish the timber. And it's actually kind of protected from a wind event as well, because it's kind of a little bit closed in. There's a lot of competition there. You know, there'll be guys coming by with 20 spider rig poles out about every 10 minutes. You know, you look out there and there's 15 boats trolling around. But you know, it's fishable, and I've caught fish up there. Another reason to go too is just amenities, right? It's a state park, so you have, you know, both RV sections, so you can kind of see here at the entrance when you come into the state park, there's RV campground kind of things and bathroom facilities. There's day use marina up here on this point. That's actually right over here. So, you know, on that southern end when you come in, again, there are amenities. The cabins then are up here, so you can drive and park at your cabin. Then the other marina is over here on the north end. And again, that's a boat launch up here, and this is that cove, all that timber before you get out into the main part of the lake. And again, good facilities there. It's a swim beach, for, you know, kids and all that kind of stuff in the summer. Usually we're there in March, nobody's swimming. Cabins, you know, again, state park, they're nice cabins. Who stayed in a state park cabin? No? Yeah. Yeah, they're usually pretty clean. They've got pots, they got pans, they got, you know, bed linens and everything. I mean, they supply pretty much everything. You don't have to really worry about too much. If you know, cooking something special, I guess you need to do it. About the only restriction we have is the cabins here are out over the water, and you're not supposed to, you know, have barbecue pits or fish fryers and all that on the boardwalks. So we kind of have to just, when we do our fish fry, we come back up here to the parking lot and we set up, we use our tailgate as the table and fry all our fish, and then, you know, bring it back down to the cabin and have supper. That's about the biggest inconvenience of it, of anything. But other than that, you know, cabins are clean, they're pretty reasonable. Like I said, they have options that sleep anywhere from 6 to 8, or, well, yeah, 6 or 8, depending on what you choose. And they even have some that are not over the water, that are on the other side of the levee. Again, boat launches are great. I mean, they're well concrete, good, nice concrete boat ramps and piers. Again, one on the south, the one on the right side there is the southern boat launch. You're kind of in that cove there, and that's the one on the north end. Oh, and also the full-service marina on the north end has a bait and tackle shop and all that kind of stuff if you need any of that kind of stuff. Other activities, there's golf course on the north end. If you're into golf, I don't play golf, I don't know. They say it's a nice course. Then there's the Bayou Macon paddle trail. So again, this is kind of hard to see, but here's the north end of the reservoir. There's a boat launch into Bayou Macon. So you could go down Bayou Macon and almost to I-20. There's another free public boat launch you could take out. So if you wanted to fish Bayou Macon, every time I've been, it's been super muddy. Looks like chocolate milk. But I guess if you wanted a paddle trip or you wanted to, you know, try to fish it, you could. There's free public access to it. And then the other thing is, if you go and you haven't been there, you do need to go to Poverty Point Natural or Heritage Area, the indigenous I guess mounds, yeah, site. And so, you know, this is what the reservoir was named after. It's like what, the largest archaic site in North America.
It's supposed to be like one of the oldest.
Yeah, well, when I say archaic, it's yeah, it's one of the
Well,
oldest.
I think we found recently, there's one called Watson Break
Yeah,
near Monroe
it's older.
that predates it with some mounds on it, but,
It's small.
yeah.
My wife does research on Poverty Point, so.
But anyway, it's a great place
Oh.
to see. It's about almost a mile across those two.
Yeah, so what this is a bunch of ridges that were made by
Acid
hand,
road.
you know, dumping, you know, to make. So you think of an Indian mound, and you just basically think that they made these concentric circular mounds, a mile from one end to the other. And then
6 feet high.
some other mounds and so.
Originally, we think they were 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
They're not there that tall anymore because of agriculture, but originally, we're pretty sure they were about 6 feet tall. The mound, the big mound is 250.
Is what?
It's 250, I think, and, well, 60 feet tall, but it's 250 feet across. And it would be taller, except when they put that highway through it, they took dirt from the top of that big mound. I know, huh?
Yeah.
It's hard to think of. The only saving thing about that is you don't find artifacts on that big mound. It's just dirt. Now, there may have been structures on top, we'll never know. But when it is not artifact rich there. The north end and the south end are very artifact rich. But where that mound is and those ridges in front of that mound, there's not much there. There's not much activity going on there. So it's real special. The most special part is the plaza.
The center part.
The
And
east, it faces, you know, that.
faces
mound
east. Yeah, faces east. There's a big bluff on water. And then
Yeah.
this Poverty Point culture has these artifacts that are sort of document where there's other places that have them, but not this big. There was one on the Mississippi coast, and it's same thing, faced east. It was next to a big body of
Concentric
water.
ridges
So there's something about, you know, having that facing east with those ridges,
and
and
water in front.
we don't know what, but anyway.
But it drops off 30 feet, so you have to figure whoever, you know, the big daddy rabbit, whoever's standing on that top of that mound, can see,
Yeah.
you know.
Sacrifice what we got.
Yeah, you know, who
Or
knows?
just tell the sun good morning,
Right.
thank you for showing up.
So why do they call it
Poverty Point, there was a plantation there, and it didn't succeed, so it's called Poverty Point. They called the plantation Poverty Point, and in the 1950s, archaeologists were there, finding all this great stuff. They were on ground level. And after World War II, they start taking aerial photographs of the Mississippi. You know, the Army Corps engineer wants to see what they got to work with, and they come with this photograph of these things, you know, with this big mound. And they show Dr. Webb and Woody Gagliano and all those guys who were there and say, where do y'all think this is? And they're like, well, man, that must be like out west, or no, it's right here. It's where you've been digging. So they had no idea because it's so big. And they were standing right there. So it's a pretty amazing place. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we have one in Louisiana that we need to visit and take care of, but it's pretty cool.
Didn't the establishers trade route from South
Oh,
America, Central
absolutely.
America with
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff,
There's-
there's obsidian from Yellowstone, there's all kind of flint stuff from Arkansas. And we think there is somehow, they know about the Olmec culture. We don't know how they do it. I mean, maybe it's tradespeople coming in, or, you know, Marco Polo shows up or something, I don't know, but, you know, they're Marco Polo. But it's not hard to imagine, because they're traveling in these 40-something foot canoes. You do that because you're putting stuff in it, you know. So people are people. So anyway, it's really very interesting. They have little figurines and the artifact house study and.
So if you're up there, I mean, definitely make time to go. There's a museum and a little tour thing.
Yeah.
It's a state facility as well, so. But with that, I think I'll,
Take one picture.
I don't think you mind.
There, a fishing question.
Sure.
When you're trolling, are you using a slip cork when you're trolling? Because it would seem it would drag and
yeah,
lift it up.
right. Typically when we're trolling on the banks, no. You know, I'm just setting a cork 18, 20 inches. You've got your typical kind of leader set up, and, you know, maybe you can move it. Yeah, you can move it up and down a little bit if you need to. I could get, you know, my casting gets to the point where if I get more than maybe 3 feet deep, 36 inches, below my cork, it just becomes trouble and ugly.
Yeah.
So,
Do you ever just straight jig with it like people do with crappie bowls? Like,
I haven't. If we're fishing without an indicator, then I'm usually using some sort of sinking fly, sink tip or sink line, and I'm counting down and trying to move the strip. I've never just tied on and just kind of drifted over. I mean, people do that, but for me, it becomes, again, I guess, just flies so light and getting it down and keeping contact with it and feeling when the fish bite. Whereas with the indicator, I just feel like I get a better understanding of what's going on and when it's getting bit and when it's not. I mean, maybe that's just me. But
pretty subtle.
yeah. And honestly, that's another reason I like this particular slip cord. Two things about slip cords: you need to have one that really slips, right? Because again, unlike a 16th ounce or quarter ounce crappie jig that's really going to pull a line down, if you got a pretty light fly on there, even though I'm adding some split shot, you've got to get that to pull that line down through that. And so you need a slip cord that's really, really going to slip, and move. So, again, I like this one. The other thing I like about this one is, it'll sit there, and then if it tilts up because the fish have hit it, I can see that really good. So I really like this style. Again, some of these guys, they don't mind these pegged corks. They like them. They work. I mean, you get them pegged right, and when that fish hits, you can set the hook, and it doesn't affect the hook ratio. I mean, even that little bit of slip in the line, they still hook well, and then it just pops, and then the whole thing just slides. But what I don't like about this is you do have to reset it every time, right? If you catch fish, you have to reset it. Now, you do the same thing. You use your stoppers on your line to stop and keep it in place. So you don't have to measure every time to put it back, but I like the bigger slip cord.
Right, start with those little plastic
little,
soft
little
things.
plastic beads. Yeah, I brought some.
On your slip cord, what stops your line on top of the indicator?
Yeah, so there's some small beads. So there's a couple styles. Again, it's personal preference, but these are very little rubber beads. And when you put your line through there and slide this little rubber bead on there, and I actually put 2 of them, and that basically keeps it in place. So I like that style. The other style is knots. Yeah, slip knot. Yeah. So the other slide is these slip knots, and you basically slide that on there and tighten it down, and it keeps it from going up. And again, there's not a lot of pressure on that, so once it hits and goes down, I mean it's not like it's pushing on your line a lot. So.
Do you pull out a lot of smaller fish, or is this pretty much a good average size when you catch them?
Like I said, I mean, I'll be honest, on sockeye, we've never had to throw a fish back.
Really?
I mean, maybe that says we're not catching enough, but it also just seems like, I mean, every fish we catch is in, plenty good to throw in the ice chest and go. Now, the few bass we've caught, again, we've hit a few in that slot we've had to throw back. To be honest, I don't think I've ever caught one over 19, but we've caught a few, under 12.
The white perch are always good size, just to keep it.
Yeah, the white perch have always just been good fish to keep. I mean, we're really, and like I said, for us, state parks, clean, you're right on the water. It's reasonable cost. We're splitting that amongst 6 of us in the cabin. It's just been a nice little place to fish.
Do you reserve it 6 months out because it's so hard to get?
Yeah, maybe 6 months is exaggerating, but yeah, I mean, if you're shooting for that March time frame and spawn, it's hard to get, and especially a weekend.
Yeah, Darin, and I think too, you can't rent any further out than 6 months. Right?
Or a year. I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know, but there are regs
Yeah.
about that. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people want to set up their cabin for like 2 or 3 years in a row, and you can't do that. They won't allow it.
Yeah.
They won't let